having that physical gold gives you a stronger position, I'll say that. Whether or not they're going to remonetize and so on, I have no evidence for that. We could talk about the positives of Bitcoin and the positives of any other asset class or whatever. The so-called shortcomings of gold are why it's positive. Like they say, oh, but you can't move it across the border easily, or it doesn't do this and doesn't do that. That's the advantage of gold. Gold is its own thing and it does it better than anything else.
This is Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.
All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of Little by Little. I'm happy to be joined by David Quintieri, author of The Money GPS, leading voice in the sound money movement, someone who's been sounding the alarm on global debt, the Fiat failure, financial control systems, long before it was mainstream. Someone who I'm excited to talk today to about gold and silver and the debt spiral and what's going on with BRICS and a whole bunch more. David, welcome. Good to have you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me on and for the nice introduction.
Absolutely. You know, I in doing a little bit of research about you, I noticed you've called this the time of deception. In your view right now, David, what's the biggest lie that are being told to people right now about the economy? What do you mean about this being the time of deception?
I think a lot of people believe that there's more of a runway than there is. And if you look around, you're going to see a lot of, fantastic things that are occurring. You could point to so many different positives, and yet we don't realize the underneath all of that, there's so much rot. We have this debt, which is impossible to pay back. And, regardless of what happens with Doge and regardless of with all this other stuff, they can't physically pay it back because the way that they created the system, created out of thin air, the interest, they create interest out of that. It's impossible. There's just not enough wealth to pay off that debt. And they do it on purpose, of course. And the central bankers are completely responsible for this. I always like to see how they point the finger. Oh, it's Jerome Powell's fault. It's the government's fault. It's Nancy Pelosi's fault. And ultimately, the Federal Reserve never gets the finger pointed at it because it's in the shadows. And when we start investigating that, it starts to really make sense. And we could realize the fiat system itself is the biggest issue.
Yeah, it sure seems that way. A fiat system that has allowed the United States to not only go 37 trillion in debt on balance sheet, but north of 150 trillion off balance sheet, with the trillion seconds being 31,688 years ago. I echo your sentiment. It will be tough to pay that off. And maybe that's why I watched something you did the other day talking about Americans financing groceries with buy now, pay later apps. Kind of pulling on that string a little bit more, David, from a macro view. What does that tell you about where we really are in this system that maybe seems to be coming to an end?
When you can't pay for groceries, excuse me, without some sort of assistance, there's a problem. Sure, you could point to people that have terrible financial education, bad spending habits. There's a lot of that. There is. You see people who are in debt and they just make the same mistakes over and over again. But it shows us overwhelmingly that there is a core issue, and that is stuff, regular stuff, food, housing, energy. These things are just too expensive for people. And when I look at it, it's, oh, we need the government to do this. We need the government to do that. But nobody wants to say, well, do you remember those trillions they printed a few years ago? Yeah, that's why this currency is not worth it as much anymore. But because there's a disconnect, they're like, yeah, some money got printed over there. And now when I go to the store, everything is more expensive. They don't see the connection there. But of course, that's why that happened. It happened because you dilute that currency, and it's, you can't change that. That is a simple matter of fact. You can't get away with printing money. It's not something you could run away from. You could print the money, you could resolve things temporarily, and then you have to pay the price later. Nouriel Roubini, I read his one of his books years ago, and it's funny how he said, basically, okay, so we have a crisis. What we have to do is print a bunch of money, fix it up, and then deal with it later. It's like, no, that's not how it works. You're not going to resolve it by printing that money. You're just going to pay for it later. You're going to pay for it later, and and the more you do that, if we look at the cycles, previously, okay, you have the Great Depression, sure, certainly, but if you looked at different cycles, they would be a lot more muted on the way up, on the way down. But today we have extremes. The ups go up like a roller coaster, down like a roller coaster, and it happens so aggressively, and it happens for a lot less that, it took for that to move. So you just see the patterns in consumer behavior and the way things that are, going on today. And it's a very frightening scenario because most people are not prepared. Look at Spain and Portugal. Look at any time there's a hurricane. Look at what happens. What do people do? They're rushing to the store to go get stuff. It's like, they're in the place that gets a hurricane 5 times a year. And as soon as a hurricane is about to hit, they're at the store preparing. It's like, you knew it was coming. It's not a black swan. These things are happening, and those people are not prepared. So you can imagine.
Yeah, and my daughter was in Barcelona just a few days ago when the power went out, and said that within a matter of 45 minutes, it had kind of descended into chaos. Rumors swirling of terrorism and it becoming something much bigger than it appears to have been. Luckily, I had given her some cash. I was visiting her as she has just a few weeks left before she comes home. In fact, she just got home. So at the time, she had a few weeks left, and I'd given her some cash for the last couple of weeks she was there. And luckily, she said she took it to the beach with her on her last day before coming home. That's the day the power went out. And says if she didn't have cash, she would have been, pardon my French, but screwed, that there was nowhere to go. You couldn't do anything. Her phone was dying. She couldn't charge it. She couldn't use Apple Pay. Didn't have a credit card on her. And again, we see just how fragile the system is. And then you talk about, a lot of people don't see this, don't see the inflation, even though we had this massive money printing. And maybe that's because the smoke and mirrors, this wall of statistical smoke and mirrors that is the CPI, that takes out of the equation homes and food and fuel, things that are inflating. It's an interesting time, to say the least, no question about it. But to your point, yeah, when people are borrowing money to pay for food, it's a scary thing. And along those same lines, David, it seems like the Fed is boxed in. I'd like your opinion on this, because, and it's not just the Fed, you could say most of the Western central banks, do we raise rates to fight inflation and then the system cracks? Do we pivot like the Bank of England did, which you've been, I know that you've been critical of in past, and inflation reignites? Are we witnessing the slow motion collapse of Fiat? And I'll just say one last thing to caveat that. It wasn't but a week or two ago that Powell came out and said, well, we may have to abandon our dual mandate of stable prices, meaning low inflation, and full employment. What he's saying here again is, well, inflation ain't going anywhere. If we want to have employment that isn't falling off a cliff in a massive recession, we're going to have to abandon that. What's your feeling? Are we witnessing a slow motion collapse of fiat?
I feel that when we look at what the central bank's real, of course, they have the dual mandate, which is hilarious. They haven't done, their report card isn't too good on either. Their real mandate is to create inflation, and they're doing an excellent job of that. And we look at it over a long period of time, what they do during this, like this is, okay, well now maybe we'll be officially a recession, but over this last little while here, you can see that, their fake jobs numbers, the fake inflation numbers, all these things, they look pretty rosy. So if we're going to go by those stats, they look pretty rosy. Why are they not? It just seems like easy money is still there, despite you look at the financial conditions index and things, not necessarily, that they're doing quantitative easing or what have you, but we're in a fairly easy money environment. And if they're going to do that even more, it would take some recognition that there has been a change. Are we moving into recession? Okay, if we're moving into recession now, we could start, stop with the quantitative tightening. They could begin potentially at some point quantitative easing, or at least start to cut interest rates. And so when I look at that, I just try to first associate with the statistics that they use, all the the fake inflation, PCE numbers, all these things, and then okay, what are they looking at here? And then I look at the real mandate, which is to create inflation and destroy the middle class, and then I say, okay, now let's get a good idea of what they're trying to achieve here. I just think over the long period of time, they're specifically trying to create a crisis. They constrict credit at a perfect time so that the Warren Buffetts of the world can come in, and then they buy things for pennies on the dollar. He bought Geico at like whatever it was, 98% off. Like people question the guy. They say, oh, he's an old timer. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And then he's had a pretty good track record. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if he was closest to the information wins. I think information is a currency more valuable than money. And guys like Warren seem to just always be at the tip of the spear. What does it say when he's sitting on almost $500 billion in cash and more treasuries than the Federal Reserve? I think your points are spot on. A friend of mine, God rest his soul, Jim Sinclair, used to talk about derivatives as weapons of mass financial destruction. And I read once where you talked about them, in your mind, being more dangerous than war or famine. To your point, if the Fed really is trying to do these things, like destroy the middle class, do you still believe that we're in that space right now where derivatives do represent potentially the catalyst to blowing up this whole system, maybe bringing on a reset? Are you still looking at derivatives as one of the key points that people should be paying closer attention to, if it's at all possible?
I think something, I speculated something a little while ago, and I'm sure you were right there with me, but when SVB and Signature Bank failed, another bank failed, Credit Suisse. And if you remember, they said, we're going to hide the details of this. We're going to hide them not for the normal, I think it was either 20 or 30 years. We are going to make it 50 years. And something was so dark that they not only had to hide it from the public, they had to hide it for 50 years. And it'll probably get extended. After that 50 years, they just push it off. So something was in there. Maybe it was something to do with derivatives. Maybe it was somebody getting some big payout, maybe some big payday. But there was something there that I think exposed the system to a great degree. They covered the whole thing up. UBS, Credit Suisse, hey, you're now one. You get put together. This nonsense that like you could put garbage underneath another thing and then somehow it's not garbage anymore. That to me, it just signals how fragile the system really, in truth, really is.
You got to wonder if that rot is bubbling up on UBS's balance sheet. It would seem that that's not something easily papered over. I don't know. It's just that makes me wonder. I did not hear that, but that's something that I'm going to dig deeper into because that's very atypical for sure. And you're right. When Signature and Silicon Valley Bank failed, that was a big deal in this country, but it was papered over even though the Dodd-Frank Act says you can't do that anymore, it was cited as being too systemic to the system. You wonder how many more of these systemic type of situations will rear their head again. And that's kind of your point, that how everything is incestuously tied together through derivatives. And that's why they had to bail out AIG in 2008. I guess only time will tell, but I like your answer, and you've inspired me to dig deeper into the Credit Suisse issue. Let's switch gears just a little bit, and we'll move towards the precious metals space. You've constantly been someone who calls gold and silver real money. I agree. I think it is money. It's wealth. Has been for thousands of years through world wars and hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, etc. Why do you believe that they're more important now than ever in this economic landscape?
There's a line that I have, which is, when all else fails, then they'll turn to gold. And, you could, in the financial world, those, the money managers and things, they see bonds as a safe haven. But when the whole thing is failing, they really turn to gold. And so it's not a real safe haven. It's like, it's like shifting paper around. We're going to put it over here. We're going to put it over there. When all else fails, then they'll turn to gold. We have a group on my Fridays where we meet over Zoom, and we all kind of picked one thing. This is a few months ago. We all picked one thing. If you could invest in one thing right now, what would be that one thing to sort of carry you a little bit forward for the foreseeable future? And mine was gold. And looks like it performed well during that period because the whole big rise was there. And I said that because of uncertainty. We have uncertainty with Russia and Ukraine. We have uncertainty with Israel. We have uncertainty with recession. We don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. Is that going to cause turbulence between China and the US? On and on and on. There's a lot of additional uncertainty right now at the beginning of the new administration. And so that is a benefit to gold. The more uncertainty there is, the more difficulty there is, for one reason or another, creates that. Of course, we have inflation, we have all these other things, but gold will benefit from that.
And what about silver? Do you think it should play a larger role in people's portfolio today? I mean, because when I say gold, I mean gold and silver. But when we speak about asymmetrical risk reward, meaning muted downside and accentuated upside, I don't see. If I were in that group, I may have said silver. Now, in the end, I think gold is the place to be because of its tier one revision and the central bank's buying it. And something is different with gold now, which we'll talk about in a moment. But where does silver fit into the equation? And did anyone in that group say silver?
Nobody said silver. They were picking different stocks and different things. But my opinion on that is, we don't know. There's like the silver gold ratio and all that, and I don't follow those things personally. I always thought, if you're looking at the potential performance and trying to predict it over a longer period of time, we could see the past events, and we can look at, okay, usually gold starts to do very well, and then silver comes up behind very aggressively and outperforms it. That has happened multiple times before. And could certainly happen again. I don't like to try to predict those things. And, I don't think that you should own just one or the other, right? I don't have a particular percentage of what I just like. Can you get some of both? Great. You did good. It's kind of, I think we should be a lot less specific with it in terms of percentages and all these ratios and everything. It's just like, get your hands on some, and that's it. Because most people, they think too much. The analysis paralysis of it all. It's just like, just get some. That's it.
That's the way I like to go to shop. My wife has analysis by paralysis. I say, that you take away all the fun of buying. Just go and do it and get it. And if you know you need it, go get it. And then get out of the store and go about your day. That's how I do business, or how I go shopping. But I understand your point. I don't mean to make light of it. I agree. it's important to own it in your monetary, your own personal monetary quiver. And I can respect that answer. I personally think silver is something that will deliver outsized returns. But if I only had one trade to make, I think I too would probably choose gold, I guess, because of its tier one revision. If it was a question of what will give you the potential for highest returns with lowest downside, it would be tough for me to not choose silver. But I guess only time will tell, and I respect your answer. Along the same lines, but maybe with a bigger monetary angle or a little bit more macro, something big is happening with gold. I think it's hard to debate that. We've become a net importer of gold in the United States. We've imported more gold since January than at any time, we being the United States, since the anytime after World War II, when every country on the planet sent us their gold as part of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And all of a sudden, we're seeing these kinds of huge inflows into the system. Very, very, very unusual. We're seeing tweets out of President Trump, who on Easter Sunday says, which was very interesting to me, he says, the golden rule of negotiating and success, he who has the gold makes the rules. Thank you. He tweeted that at 3 p.m. Eastern on Truth Social on Easter Sunday. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, his largest holding, when he was running a hedge fund prior to becoming the secretary, was in gold. He is a self-proclaimed gold bug. You have Judy Shelton, Trump's first nominee to run the Fed, who many think will run again, has said openly that she believes Trump will issue gold-backed treasuries July 4th, 2026, the 250th year anniversary of the country. She advocates for 50-year treasuries redeemable in gold. We're hearing all of this talk of gold. And we become a net importer. And BRICS is pushing to settle trade in commodities. Do you believe that gold is quietly being remonetized or reintegrated into the monetary system behind the scenes? And if so, what does that mean for the average person?
It's hard to say exactly. I don't have the evidence for that. I do think that there's an unusual amount of physical possession being taken. So normally they're doing the futures contracts and nobody ever takes physical possession, but there's an enormous amount is being taken in physical possession. So I think some of that is probably related to tariffs and the sanctions and all these things. And these countries need the physical bars to be moved as opposed to using the SWIFT system. So maybe they're doing trade with gold. I'm not sure, because of course it's really opaque, especially when we're dealing with China, Russia, for example. But we know that in a world of infinite money printing, they could print as much money as they want. Any country could do this. They're still buying gold. If you think about it, in the Ben Bernanke, everybody's favorite, Helicopter Ben, they basically said, why, I think it was Ron Paul asked him, why there he is. I love that. Why do we buy gold? Oh, it's tradition. That's the central bankers telling you that they buy it just because of tradition, not because it has value, not because it's a store of value, not because as like an anchor, but just because of tradition. I mean, that is really one of the stupidest answers possible, other than the fact that he knows exactly why they have to buy it and why they have it, and doesn't want to tell the truth about it, because without that gold, suddenly you have a much weaker position. So, having that physical gold gives you a stronger position. I'll say that. Whether or not they're going to remonetize and so on, I have no evidence for that. We can speculate, certainly, but I just know that physical gold not going out of style. And just to say, they talk about Bitcoin as digital gold. And we could talk about the positives of Bitcoin and the positives of any other asset class or whatever. The so-called shortcomings of gold are why it's positive. Like they say, oh, but you can't move it across the border easily, or it doesn't do this and doesn't do that. That's the advantage of gold. That's why, because it is gold. It's not something that you could, do the things that Bitcoin can do with. That's Bitcoin. Gold is its own thing, and it does it better than anything else.
Yeah, I agree with that very much. I want to talk a little bit about the BRICS before I let you go. The People's Bank of China just announced that their digital renminbi cross-border settlement system is now fully connected to 10 ASEAN countries. Those are the Southeast Asian countries, and 6 Middle Eastern nations, which is approximately 40% of global trade, which would bypass SWIFT on this system. The currency bridge, their digital currency bridge, which was the M bridge, which is now called the bridge, allows cross-border payment processing times to go from the 3 to 5 days that SWIFT would use to 7 seconds. This is a big deal, right? And I think it's a very big deal in the context that Sergei Lavrov just came out, the Russian one of the finance ministers, after comments from the chair of the Brazil meetings. This year, the meetings next in July are in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. And the chair has proposed a new BRICS payment platform. But the key here, and this is something that I think will catch a lot of people off guard, is that he's proposing it for both member and non-member countries. The comment that Sergei Lavrov emphasized was, this new payment platform will be open to non-member nations, potentially accelerating de-dollarization on a global scale. And when we talk about the Belt Road Initiative and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, all these countries that are aligned with BRICS but are not in it, you're talking 90% of human population. 3 of the 4 largest nuclear arsenals, the majority of all the commodities, the on-sea and on-land trade routes, the 100% of the rare earth purification or refining, the engine of manufacturing, all of these things that the BRICS possess, now opening up a digital payment system outside of SWIFT to non-member countries. What's your feeling on the BRICS? Is it legit? Are they legit? Or are they something that is just a passing fad?
They have their own issues, and you look at different countries have their own problems with each other too, right? But I think it's kind of like they see the commonalities between each other and are willing to do trade and are willing to expand. If you on X, there's so much info about this, but you look at the people who go to China and let's say there's one guy I follow, excuse me, one guy I follow, he's originally from Italy, lives in China, and he just shows his, dealings with manufacturers and all these things. And the tier 2 cities are much more advanced, much cleaner, much safer than the cities of the West. Forget about the tier 1s. We could make any excuse you want. The tier 2 cities, they're already more advanced and more ahead. The infrastructure is better. Things move better. Pollution is not what it was 10 years ago. They've largely fixed that in the main cities. They are manufacturing in China. They're manufacturing more of everything. The electric cars, they're all going electric, whether we like it or not. They're going electric. These cars are able to manufacture not the first gen, the newest generation of these electric vehicles. They're comparable to anything else. They're not subpar in any way. And they're going out there and they're just basically, setting up the infrastructure, financial infrastructure, to deal with each other. They're basically saying, look, we don't need the system anymore. We don't need SWIFT. We're going to lower our trade. We're going to continue to sell off our treasuries. We're going to continue to do this slowly but surely. Not become an enemy, not become, go to war or whatever. They're just saying slowly but surely, we're going to wean off of this system as we build this system over here. And they're doing it. It's not like a theory.
Or maybe it's little by little. And then
That's
all
right.
at once.
Exactly.
Sorry, we're having a little bit of lightning and thunder here. And my dog freaks out when that happens. So she was starting to howl. So I had to pick her up on my lap. So excuse me for that.
All
I
good.
think that's interesting, and they are doing it. You're right, and my friend Robert Kiyosaki often says people can't get out of the way of what they don't see coming, and I think people should not underestimate the moves that are being made across the globe. And as you mentioned earlier, a country that can print money, to infinity, at the same time impose sanctions. When a country like the United States can invade Iraq 21 years ago under false pretenses, destroy the country, topple the regime, and still occupying their country today can make these kinds of declarations, I could see how much of the world would say, well, that's not fair, that's hypocritical. And these are the type of moves where when Trump says, we're going to put 150% tariffs on you if you continue to do this thing with the BRICS. Well, those aren't tariffs. Those are sanctions pretending to be tariffs. So something that I guess only time will tell. As we wrap up, David, you've described this environment as a perfect storm, recession and debt stress and currency pressure, all of this stuff converging. If you were giving a young person a couple, one or two concrete things that they could do right now to start to protect themselves, where would you tell people to turn, or what should they start doing to prepare for whatever it is that's coming our way?
If you can, I would say, learn a skill that can be essentially scalable, a scalable skill. And so this is the type of thing where you're not going outside and digging with a shovel every day, because there's only so many hours of that you can do. You want something that is scalable, and so these are an infinite number of different excuse me infinite number of businesses that are scalable. It could be building apps. It could be doing something with I do Amazon selling, all these different things that you can do, but do something that's scalable. Why? Because you put 3 hours in, you put 10 hours in, and then it piles up and it gets bigger. The pile gets bigger. So the more work you put in, the more over time that will help you. This is something that I started many, many years ago, and has paid off more and more as time goes on. So a scalable business is the one thing that I tell everybody to start thinking about. And the number one reason is because you can sell online. And if your customers are no longer available to you because there's a recession, because there's a problem, one reason or another, you have a global audience. Okay. And that's really where I think the future is having the ability to sell to people all over the world, earning different currencies. And then you can take that and decide what assets you want to keep that in. So this is the number one thing for people, as well as just being informed. Obviously, I think it goes without saying, but to be informed, I think, is the highest level of currency you can have.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Johnny Bravo, talks about starting a business on Amazon, that anyone can do it. Do you teach courses on that? Do you tell people how to start, how to become your own business on Amazon? Are there ways people can follow that?
Yeah, I do. It's just a $10. It's not a expensive course. It's just a $10 course, which has been very successful for me and for some others that took my advice. But basically, yeah, Amazon and TikTok Shop and all these different things that are available. At least for now, we'll see what happens with that one. But yeah, I think it can be something that just regular people can learn how to do. Like I don't know how to do that. No, you just learn. It's a skill. It's not a huge thing. Yes, it's a business. It takes time. It takes energy, whatever, but it's not like rocket science, right? You can figure it out.
Yeah, he's a big advocate, but this is going to sound very naive as an American. What do you expect? You're not in the United States, are you? Where do you live?
Toronto.
Oh, you're
Toronto,
in Toronto. Yeah. Okay, I didn't realize you were my neighbor to the north.
Yes.
Is Amazon, the part that sounds naive, is Amazon like global in just about every country in the Western world? I mean, is Amazon all over Europe and all over Australia, New Zealand, or is this just a Western deal? I've never even explored that.
It is everywhere, pretty much, that you can think of, even into the Middle East. It's not I don't even know if it's in like China or Vietnam or whatever, but it is basically everywhere. So you can take the same account, the same products that you would sell to an American consumer, you could literally ship it to the UK, which I've done, and you start selling to the UK consumer. So, you know, that's what makes it scalable, because you're like, I've already invested the time and energy into finding this product. Now I'm going to take it, I'm going to bring it into the UK, and then bring it into, this country, that country. So, you don't have, the work is done more upfront.
Now, what an amazing technology. I will spare you the question on your new election, as much as I'd like to dig into that with you. We did this all off the cuff, as I mentioned when I started. The good thing I have a decent memory and remembered a lot of what I had written down, but I lost my notes as we jumped onto this show. Somehow my note program went poof. So I appreciate you spitballing with me. As much as I would like to ask you about that, I'm going to spare that. You cut through the noise like few others do. For those who want to dig deeper, I know they can read your book, The Money GPS. They can follow you on your YouTube channel with the same name. And any other ways for people to follow what you're doing? Are you on X? How do people follow and keep an, and maybe even want to take your course on Amazon? What's the best way for people to check you out?
Yeah, The Money GPS on YouTube, and I'm very active on X every day, talking about everything from financial stuff to building apps to Amazon stuff, all that on X. X is where I put my brain, just goes up on there. So,
well, you're a very cool guy. I'm surprised it's the first time that I've met you, and hopefully our paths will cross. I'm always at Jay Martin's Vancouver Resource Investment Conference in January. I'm always at Rick Rule's conference down here in my backyard in Boca in July. And you're ever down this way, I hope you'll look me up. You're a fascinating guy, and I appreciate your straightforward manner and hopping in for a conversation today. I hope to do it again with you, David, and I look very forward to picking up where we left off. But again, sincere thanks for jumping in today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
You got it, brother. Take care.
Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.